Hello, and thanks for joining the FrostySith channel today. We are finishing up a morning ruck, and then we're going to get back into the office and we're going to dive into a review of the Lumix G95 camera. We're going to talk about 3 or 4 things that I've had kind of issues with the camera, and maybe my thoughts on what I would do differently if I were making the purchasing decision today versus back when I pre-ordered it in May. So stay tuned to the end, and then hit subscribe if you're not already subscribed to the channel, and hit the bell so that you get notifications every week when we update new content on the channel. All right, let's get back to the office and we'll get into this. Okay, so the business day is winding down and I'm just starting to do some video editing here, and I wanted to wrap up the first review, kind of the 90-day look at the Lumix G95 camera. Pre-ordered this back in May, got it early in June. I did an initial unboxing video on it, and all in all, I love the camera. And so I think Lumix is great. I think it's a super value. I like micro four thirds. I understand the crop issues with the sensor and the lenses compared to the 35mm standard. But kind of getting to my first, what I wish I had understood better about the camera would be the 4K video cropping that occurs when you switch from still mode to video mode on the camera. Now, ultimately, I've been able to work around this issue just by modifying my workflow, and I've got a wide angle lens to go on top of this 15mm prime lens that I use, which is a fast prime. It's 1.7 f stop prime lens, which I love. And it gives me that great shallow depth of field and the bokeh or bokeh blurriness in the background. But the crop took me the video crop really took me some time to get used to in my workflow, because for example, if you're looking at the viewfinder and looking at your composure and you're not in record mode, that's not the composition that you're going to get when you're shooting video with this camera, because there's going to be a significant crop in. And so once you hit record, you really can't set up your video composition on this camera until you hit the record button and can actually see the view of what you're recording. And ultimately, that hasn't stopped me from getting the video that I want. It's just that if I had to do it over again, I would think more seriously about looking at the G9 or the GH5, because a lot of the work that I do with this is video work. And to satisfy my creativity, I think the still quality of this camera is great. The internal stabilization is great. Those are all positives. The lens, you have lenses that have internal stabilization, even better. But the crop in 4K is one of the issues I really wish I had understood. And there's no way around it short of using the camera ahead of time. Because the last time I was doing photography was 35mm, and it was mostly black and white oriented. It was real film, a manual Canon camera back in the day. And other than that, I've been using point and shoot digital cameras, Olympus and iPhone type point and shoot cameras for the last 20 years. And I'm really just getting back into the creativity of robust videography and stills. And so I just didn't know that. Now, is that a killer for me? No, because it hasn't stopped me from getting any of the video shots that I really want to get. It just, I have to modify my workflow a little bit to understand it. And I guess that's true with any tool that you use. But so my number one issue would be the crop. Now, number two would be the autofocus. Part of this is related to my experience with the controls, not just on the camera, because, you know, this camera has very intuitive, obvious controls. It's got 3 function buttons that you can customize functions on. The autofocus is right here. It has several autofocus modes. So it has, you know, face or target mode. It has a continuous focus mode, and it has manual focus on it. And it's really easy to switch between modes. The functions, you know, on the menu system to switch focus modes is excellent. It's very intuitive. It's easy to understand. So that's not an issue either. However, the number of focus points on the sensor vary dramatically compared to, say, for example, the G9. And the price point difference between the G95 and the G9 is not huge. I mean, it's hundreds of dollars. It's not thousands. It's not even $500. It's a few $100s difference. And so if I had to do it again, I would look real strongly at both the G9 and the GH5. And, you know, when the next GH camera comes out, I'll have to look real strongly at that one. Because again, a lot of what I do is use this camera for currently is videography. Now, fixing to be headed to a backcountry trip in the Wind River Range, and I'm hoping to do, you know, some Milky Way photography. I'm hoping to do some general landscape photography, and not just point and shoot, capture the moment type stuff, which the iPhone's great for. I mean, it does a really good job at that. And I'm sure the Samsung Galaxy and other phones do as well for sort of, you know, capturing the moment, point and shoot stuff. But this has all the abilities to do really great photography work, but the autofocus can just be annoying. And if you've looked at some of the last few videos that I've done, you probably noticed that. You say, well, gosh, you know, why is it in and out of focus? Why is that moving? And it's just because of the particular situations that were occurring during that video and the autofocus. Now, some of the more recent videos, like related to, well, they may not have come out yet. So some of the very most current videos that are coming out in August that are done here in my office, those you'll notice probably don't suffer from that problem. And that's because my skill level a little bit has went up, and I figured out how to manually focus the camera. But even on that topic, what I would say is that if I turn the camera off, so I can set the camera up on a tripod, which I do here in the office, and some out in the field, but for sure in the office, and I can get it focused manually, and it's, you know, yards away from me on the other side of the office when it's set up on a tripod, just to get a tight crop, because as I mentioned in the first part of this discussion, the 4K crop's pretty significant. So it's pretty wide angle when you're just looking at the viewer, and then you turn on the recorder and it crops in. And so there's some back and forth that I have to do to get the manual focus set up. And I can do it from my phone, from the phone app, sitting here at this spot, I can get it manually focused. But let's say I'm shooting some video and I want to take a look at the video. If I turn the camera off, or if the battery goes dead, then even though I haven't changed the manual focus ring on the camera, if I just, you know, put a new battery in it, set it back up on the tripod, turn it on, hit record, come over here, sit down and start recording, it's not in focus. You know, so I have to make certain to double check the manual focus, even if I haven't adjusted the manual ring. And this particular lens, you know, has a switch for autofocus and manual. And so I can have this in manual, and I can have the back of the phone set to manual focus mode on this, and that still occurs. And so part of it probably is my experience level with the camera and my general workflow, my expectation that the autofocus is better than it is. Like when I'm sitting here, I didn't really expect it to be searching. Even when it's not in continuous focus mode, if it's just on AFF, it will still search for me even though I'm barely moving. And so that would be my second complaint. I think when I think back to the specs on like the the G9, you know, I believe it has a lot more focusing points that the camera and the processor is dealing with than what this camera does. So that would be a consideration for those few extra $100 for the body, camera body, to maybe go and consider the G9. So that's number 2, autofocus. Number 3 is this weird issue that I have, and I haven't really dug into the forums yet. I don't know if it's an issue particular to this camera. It's a very odd issue where sometimes, you know, I can have this mounted on a tripod, the screen will work fine, and then sometimes when it's not in sleep mode, it will just stop working. Like I can't get it to come back on, but if I move the camera, it will start working. And sometimes it seems like there's an association between, is the camera tilted at a certain angle or not? And so I don't know if there's a short. I mean, the camera hasn't been dropped. It hasn't had any, you know, real rugged use at all. And so there shouldn't be a short, and it otherwise doesn't appear to be an issue. It's just kind of a bizarre gremlin that I have on this particular camera. And that would be my third issue, because that's pretty frustrating when you can't see the screen to see what your composition is, are you in frame, etc. So that would be number 3. Now, and those are really my main complaints about the camera. None of them have interrupted or kept me from getting the kind of video scenes that, you know, I want, but those are my complaints. I don't know how else to describe it to you. Why is my thing not working here? Oh, because it's not open. Again, expertise, right? So those are the 3 things that I found in the first 90 days that are slightly annoying to me. And again, those would be the crop factor on video, the auto-focusing, and then the screen issue where sometimes it just is as if it's asleep and I can't get it back on. But if I move, literally all I have to do is move the location so the screen can be articulated a certain way, you know, for the, you know, whatever angle I've got it set up at, and literally the screen will be non-responsive. But if I move the tripod a little bit over, it'll work. And if I move it back, it won't. It's the strangest thing. I know there'll probably be comments, and maybe you guys know what I'm doing wrong, but to me it seems like a gremlin, and I should probably check the forums or see if there's a BIOS update or something, because it just doesn't seem right. So those are my 3 negatives. Now, there are a lot of positives that I've talked about in the last few minutes. In particular, the phone app is pretty good. The Wi-Fi is good. I don't seem to have any problem. Using the phone app allows me to sit here when the tripod is all the way across the room, and I can autofocus, not autofocus, I can manually focus the shot so that now when I'm working in the studio and doing videos like this, using this camera, it's not set to any autofocus mode, it's set to manual focus, and I can know and have confidence that as long as I check the manual focus every time the camera has a power interruption, then I can know and have confidence that it's in focus on me in this general area in front of my face, and everything else in the background will be blurry a little bit, but the main focus of the video will be in focus. And so the app lets me do that. It's great. The menus are intuitive. The button controls are great. My sophistication level with setting up the function buttons, I haven't done that yet, but I'm now at the point where I'm considering, setting up certain function buttons to do certain specific things, so that when I just press that button, it immediately does that, and I'm not having to go through the menu or flip knobs or whatever. What else? The controls are all really intuitive. That's a plus. Because there's a white balance, ISO, and exposure button right here, I don't have to set up special function buttons to get to those. I don't have to go through the menus. I can, but I don't have to. I can just press one of these and move on down the road and get right to what I'm looking at, and use the wheels to adjust whatever the variable is that I'm wanting to adjust. So all in all, do I have regrets about the purchase? No, I really don't, because as I mentioned earlier in the video, I'm just kind of getting back into photography as a creative outlet. And these modern cameras, at least the Lumix series and the G95 in particular, they do a tremendous amount of things, and there's just a ton of power in here. I'm really looking forward to doing some night photography, Milky Way photography out in the Wind River Range, and I'm really pleased overall. Having said that, if I knew everything today that I knew back in May when I pre-ordered, there's at least a 50% chance that I would go with the G9 or GH5, but probably the G9, at least a 50% chance that I would go with that. Now, having said that, am I going to sell this and get rid of it? No, I'm not. I think it, for the minor inconvenience of my workflow to deal with those issues that I mentioned, and some of it, again, is probably experience related, like on the manual focus for me. I think I can overcome all those things, and ultimately this is going to serve me for a long, long time. So all in all, I give it 2 thumbs up for the Lumix G95, and I'll use it for another 90 days or 6 months, and we'll probably have an additional follow-up review. And certainly if I get a different Lumix camera down the road, I'll be able to compare directly the difference between the two and give you some advice, or at least my thoughts on those. So that's it. That really wraps it up for this first review of the Lumix G95. If you haven't had time to hit the subscribe button in just a minute when the video ends, do that. And make sure to click the bell so that it's solid, so that you get notifications each week when we update new content on the FrostySith channel. And remember, get up, get out, live a little. See ya.